All right, friends, if you have your Bibles, open with me one more time to the book of 1 Timothy. We are not at the end of the series. We're going to be coming back here in a couple of weeks after Easter and picking up with 2 Timothy, but this is our last Sunday within Paul's first letter to his child in the faith. And what I'm going to do here this morning is based on the text, based on the close of this letter. I'm going to provide a summation of everything that Paul has included for the church thus far in this letter. And so he wraps things up very nicely, even gives us a challenge, or gives us a challenge through Timothy, I should say, as the church on how we are to prioritize God, prioritize faith as part of our life. Here in verses 17 through 21, this is where we're going to be here this morning. Paul uses these verses as a last appeal and also a reminder of the reason that he is writing to this young man, to this pastor that is there in the church in Ephesus, to this colleague who has been with him on multiple missionary journeys, planted multiple churches, someone who is definitely not inexperienced, but certainly is going to need some guidance as Paul realizes that his time in ministry is coming to a close. And so it is okay, as we think about this, for our church to look at these words and to look at the text and to look at this letter as we have throughout our time, and to realize that if we're doing this, if we're following the guidance of God, we're going to look different than the outside world. And it is okay for us to look different, not arrogant or conceited or to think that we are somehow better, but for us to prioritize different things, to set goals and to have desires that are different than the people who are outside of the church, outside of the family of faith. And part of the reason why we gather together each and every Sunday, not just study the same things, but actually are here in the same room, studying the same text and experiencing this together, is so that we can encourage one another that even if we look different than those outside the church, that this is okay because this is what God desires for each and every one of us. This is an encouragement. The biblical text, the close of this letter, is an encouragement for us this morning. So follow along with me as I read 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 through 21. The Word of God says, "As for the rich in the present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. O Timothy, guard the deposit entrusted to you. Avoid the irreverent babble and contradictions of what is falsely called knowledge, for by professing it some have swerved from the faith. Grace be with you." So as we grow in our faith, one of the questions that we want to ask ourselves is, how can we make God a priority in our life? There will be something different about us after we come into faith. This is true for the young child who grows up in the church, and this is all that they've ever known. When they make that decision and they make that profession to follow Christ, something will be different about them than it was before. This is certainly true of someone who has no background in the faith and probably made some mistakes as they were growing up, and maybe even some mistakes in adulthood, and yet they realize who Jesus is and they realize who the gospel is for the first time. They will look different from that point on than they did before. There will always be things that we prioritize as aspects of faith that we didn't have before. There is no doubt our lives will change. But we don't always know how to begin to prioritize God as part of our life. There are questions. We don't always know what changes need to be made to look more like Christ, rather than to look like the brokenness around us. Paul starts this discussion with the area of life that is often the most difficult for us, and that is our finances. To make God a priority in our life, we prioritize righteousness over riches. All of the countercultural commands from God that get the most attention in this letter, if you're looking at chapter 1 all the way through chapter 6, we see a lot of discussion surrounding the gender roles that are described here. We see a lot of discussion surrounding church discipline and the use of charity by the church that are described here in this letter in chapter 5. However, when Paul is concluding, he speaks twice about money and the need to steward that money correctly for God. This shows the importance of it in our faith life. This started in verses 9 and 10 in this very chapter, chapter 6, but it continues here in verse 17, where he says, "As for the rich in this present age, charging them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us everything to enjoy." Money is a complicated subject because our culture complicates it in many different ways. We have lots of sayings such as, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Maybe some say, I am dirt poor. He doesn't know the value of a dollar. All of these are sayings that we have to describe money and finances. You know, one of the best classes that I took whenever I was in school, whenever I was in middle school, when we got to 8th grade, we actually had the opportunity to take some electives. To those things that were outside of the normal coursework. We had the chance to choose different ones and really to prepare us for high school when we got to choose some of these electives. One of the classes I took was a business class, and half of that semester, half of that business class was spent, just learning the very, very basics of business and finance and these sorts of things. But the second half was the most interesting. The second half was all about personal finance management. And so I don't know how they would teach it today, but back in those days, we actually learned how to write a check and balance a checkbook and all of these different things as part of the class. And it was very interesting. And I ended up taking some business classes whenever I was in high school. Ended up being a business major in my undergrad whenever I got to college. And all of this is something that's necessary for the world. Yes, we all we have bills to pay. We have things that we have to do in order to live. And personal finance is very much a part of that. Paul felt it necessary also to discuss this subject of money and specifically our personal money, our personal finances, and the expectation that is on all of us within the church. When Paul says, "As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty," make no mistake, he is talking about each and every one of us in this room. Every single one of us are included in the rich of this age. According to the World Bank, 44% of the world's population live on less than $7 a day, while another 10% live on less than $3 a day. And so a lot of what we would spend on lunch or even on a coffee if you go to Starbucks, the rest of the world has for their entire day to live on. In the United States, 92% of households own a car, while 37% of households own 2 cars. Globally, less than 15% of the world's population own a vehicle. We take these things for granted, but Paul doesn't, and God certainly doesn't when he is giving us instructions for the future. These are blessings. These are things that were given to us in order to use them to glorify God, not for our own comfort or enjoyment. This is why he says at the end of verse 17, charge them not to be haughty, but instead to set their hopes on God, not on the uncertainty of riches. We don't put our hope in money. We don't place our love over money. Instead, we realize what money is. It is a resource. It is something that is owned by God that He has given to each and every one of us because He is entrusting that to us to steward on His behalf, to use it in righteous ways. We prioritize the righteous over the riches. And when we realize that these things here that we have, they don't belong to us, they belong to God, it will change the way we think about life in general. We will start to have existential thoughts and question, what is the meaning of life? What is my purpose? Why am I here? Why has the Lord placed me here in this time and this place? Verse 18 and 19 tell us they are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share. Again, we're talking about financial resources here. Thus storing up treasures for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. This ending part of this verse here is what is most important. So that they may take hold of that which is truly life. It's easy for us to be distracted away from the truly important things. It's easy for us to prioritize the trivial and the profane and to neglect the sacred within our life. As we look at 1 Timothy as an entire letter, what we see encouraged is for us to prioritize eternity over the moment. It does not always benefit us in a practical way to pursue good works rather than riches themselves. We may even think to ourselves, it would be nice if everyone was just rewarded with the appropriate level of blessing, the appropriate level of wealth and prosperity as was determined by their faith. We might even have that thought pop into our head. But then we have to ask, would it really be better if that was the case? This rationale here is the same that is used when discussing riches in a global sense. We judge each other monetarily and in terms of good deeds based on those who are around us, based on those who are in our sphere of influence, the people in our neighborhood, the people in our localities. We think we are rich in good works because we do more good works than our neighbor. We think we don't have enough money because we don't have as much money as our neighbor. And this is naturally how we determine what we have and the good that we do. But this is not how God judges the world. It isn't about whether or not we are doing better or worse than our neighbor. Instead, it is the realization that all of us are insufficiently righteous. There is nothing that we can do. There's nothing that we will do. There's nothing that we have done that would make us righteous in the eyes of God. Not a single thing. It doesn't matter if we are doing just a little bit better than our neighbor or not. We have not reached that necessary standard of righteousness. I remember when I was in high school, I was a senior in high school, and there were two guys on the basketball team. Our basketball team was pretty good, and we were very senior heavy my senior year. And so a lot of the football players and baseball players, we would go to the games and try and support our team. But there were two guys on the basketball team who were the 14th and 15th best player on a 15-man basketball team. They were literally the two worst guys on the team. And they did not like each other at all. And they would argue constantly at who was the better basketball player. And we would just sit back like, you're the 14th and 15th best player on a 15-man roster. It doesn't really matter who's better. You're both terrible. You're not getting in the game. But when we think about our good deeds and we think about the things that we do, the Bible tells us it's just filthy rags to God. There's nothing that we can do that's worthy, that's righteous, that He would look at us and say, that is a righteous person. That is someone who is by their work and by their thoughts and by their actions, they are worthy to be in my presence. Not a single one. When we begin to compare ourselves to others in this life, we will simultaneously feel like we don't have enough, and at the same time feel like we are doing better than many. This is the trap. This is what Satan himself tried to tempt Jesus with. Do this and I'll give you what you need to survive. And then do this and I will give you power. I will give you glory. But Jesus constantly had an eternal focus, not a focus in the moment. It was this very reason that Jesus came, eternity, our life with God. Paul puts it this way to the Colossian church. He says, if then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on the things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. It is a focus. It is a mindset. It's a decision that we make to set our mind on the things above. It's a worldview. It's how we see events. It's how we interpret them, and we decide what to do next. This is not a natural thought. It requires effort. It will not be the practice of your neighbors and the people who are around you. It will not be the practice of those who you go to work with and that you see more than anybody else. But it will please your Father who is in heaven. The people in your neighborhood won't understand on earth, as Paul says, but it will please God who is above. And that is where we want to set our minds. That's where we want to incline our hearts. How can we make God a priority in our life? Very simply, we can think about God more often. These are the things above rather than the physical, the profane, the things that are here on earth. And this is true because if it wasn't already clear, the things of earth are not the righteousness of God. Look again at verse 20. He says, O Timothy, guard the deposit entrusted to you. Avoid the irreverent babble and contradictions of what is falsely called knowledge. Guard the deposit entrusted to you. Deposit here is the word paratheke, and it literally means trust. Just like putting your money into a trust, taking it out of your name and putting it into the trust's name to be used for a purpose that you have assigned to it. This is the word that's being used here. A lot of the translations won't even use the word deposit. They'll translate it as something like the way or the teachings or the things that God has given, but it's literally the trust. Paul's telling Timothy to guard what God has given him, but not just monetary wealth. We're talking here about something far more precious. We're talking about the gospel. We're talking about doctrine. We're talking about those things that the people in chapter 1 were distorting for their own benefit. We're talking about what he describes here in these verses as irreverent babble of moral relativism. And we're talking about the contradiction of false teachers who call falsehoods truth. Guard the Word of God. Prioritize the gospel over the culture. Now, I'm not sure how many times I've used the word culture throughout this series, but it has been a lot. Because this has been the subject that the church in Ephesus, that Paul knows that Timothy and the church in Ephesus are coming up against. They're coming up against the culture. It is a major concern during the first century, and it's a major concern for us. If we look at this and we look at our world, we can know that this is a valid one. We can see people, and we can see regions, and we can see churches, and we can see entire denominations deviating from the gospel and from the guidance of the biblical text. We can see a culture that values individual desire rather than godly obedience. A culture that says, this is your truth, and this is my truth. And if they don't line up, they can both be the truth. And they have no concern for what is gospel truth. Bruce read from Psalm 37 earlier this morning, the salvation of the righteous is from the Lord. This is not just a single option for salvation. This is a declaration all the way back in the Old Testament that this is the way, the truth of salvation. Not only is that not considered the truth within our culture, it is considered offensive within our culture to say that there is only one faith, there is only one baptism, there is only one God, there is only one truth. And because of that, we have to make a decision. We do not want to purposely offend people. If you find joy in purposely offending people, then that is a heart problem with you. But at the same time, the decision we have to make is, do we compromise the gospel? Do we compromise the biblical guidance that God has given us in order to not offend someone? No matter what culture we are in, the author of Hebrews says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. This means God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. This means the gospel is the same yesterday, today, and forever. This means morality is the same yesterday, today, and forever. There is not one aspect of right and wrong, righteousness and evil and good and what is morally right. There's no change from the moment God created Adam and Eve to us today, because He is perfect. And to change something would mean that He is imperfect. But He is the same. The gospel is the same. Morality is the same, yesterday, today, and forever. Guard the trust that God has put in you. Guard what is God's possession and has given you to share, but share it correctly. Do not compromise it. Do not change the Word of God to avoid offending the culture. When we look at the life of Jesus, we see the perfect example of love and compassion, but we also see a perfect example of prioritizing the gospel and not compromising one aspect of the truth. All of the interactions that Jesus has, from talking with his mother at a wedding, to the Samaritan woman at the well, to whipping people out of the temple when they desecrate the house of God, even with Pilate prior to the crucifixion, he never once compromised the gospel or the morality of God at all, ever. And he was still able to respond in love and compassion. He loved all people. He still loves all people. And the church is to love all people. But it is not love to prioritize culture and sinful desires over the gospel. That's apathy. And the church is not called to be apathetic. We're called to be bold. We're called to speak for the truth in love and compassion, but never compromise the truth. God has trusted this to us. And we share that truth of the gospel with the world. Starting to move towards the end. Verse 21, what happens when we do not share the gospel correctly? For by professing it, what is it? It is the irreverent babble. It is the contradictions that people think is knowledge. It's cultural relativism. By professing this, some have swerved from the faith, wandered off into falsehoods, denied the truth of the gospel and the truth of God. The letter ends on a warning and a challenge. It almost looks depressing to report what is going on around Paul. He's reporting this to Timothy. But I believe that this is just another charge that he's giving to Timothy. It's a reminder of why the church and why the gospel are so important. And what is a reminder of what else we need to do to make God a priority in our life. We prioritize redemption over destruction. John 3:17. We all learned John 3:16 when we were kids. John 3:17. God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Jeshua. God is salvation. Redemption is the goal. Redemption is the mission, not just for Jesus, but also for his church. And if we're going to be a part of that mission, if we are God's team working towards that goal, then our task is not going to be to destroy evil. Our task is going to be to deliver the message that God himself, in the person of Jesus Christ, has already destroyed evil, sin, death, conquered all of these things. If the message of Christianity is not a hopeful one, then we are telling it wrong. When I'm able to present the gospel to someone, there are a lot of methods in which you can do this. I know that a lot of you probably have your favorites. The Roman road was a really popular one that they taught everybody whenever I was growing up. The North American Mission Board has the 3 circles evangelism tool. What makes that one really convenient is it's actually got an app. You can take it with you on your phone. You can just walk somebody through it right there. But when you're able to present the gospel on your own, you just have a chance to talk with somebody. All of us have our different styles. All of us have the different way in which we deliver that message. Mine always starts this way. The good news of Jesus Christ is that you are totally evil, that you are sinful, that you are not a good person. And neither am I, and neither is your spouse, and neither are your kids, and neither are your precious little grandkids. Guess what? Those babies are sinful and evil and separated from God. Every single one of us, because of our choices. Doesn't have anything to do with temptation or the backgrounds. You and I decide. We make a conscious effort every single day to rebel against God. But the good news is that God does not leave us in that brokenness, in that this world, that even we see in Genesis chapter 3, it even says that the ground is cursed. Because of the sin that we have chosen to bring into the world, even the ground, the earth itself produces earthquakes and hurricanes and tornadoes. Not because of some natural order that God has put in, but because of the way we have allowed sin to come in and change the perfect creation that God has made. But the good news is that He doesn't leave us in that. We're not able to do anything good to make up for it. Your precious little grandkids, guess what? You can't save them. Even if you were willing to go to the cross, you are not good enough to save them. But God in His grace, in His mercy, and His love, came down out of heaven, put on human flesh, became one of us to provide the perfect sacrifice that we could not provide. And that is the reason that we prioritize redemption and not destruction. The message of the gospel is a hopeful one. Instead of leaving someone in that destruction, instead of leaving someone in that, well, you're just rebellious against God and you're choosing to stay that way, so I'm not going to pray for you and I'm not going to try and help you. I'm not going to invite you to church. That's not what we're called to do. Our message is redemption. Our message is hope. We are not left in this broken place, and we don't want other people to be left in this broken place. We have to take ourselves, look in a mirror, and say, we are unworthy to be in God's presence. It is only through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And when we do that, and we really mean it, I'm not just talking about you wake up tomorrow morning and you're brushing your teeth and it's like, oh yeah, Pastor Lance said I'm evil. You're evil. No, I'm talking about really mean it. When we really understand that there's nothing good in us that would make us worthy to be in the presence of God, we will begin to see other people differently. We'll begin to see the evil in the world differently. We'll be able to see the little sinful, petty things that people do against us. We'll see that differently. And we'll want to give them hope, and we'll want to give them the message of redemption that God's given to each and every one of us. We don't look at people as enemies anymore. Satan is the enemy. Sin is the enemy. Death is the enemy. The results of the fall are the enemy. People are not the enemy to be destroyed. And that's why Paul can end this letter with the words, grace be with you. After this slightly depressing group of sentences that end the letter, he says, grace be with you, because Paul knows that it already is. Grace, redemption, reconciliation, it already rests on this young man and on the church in Ephesus. And it will continue to be with the church until Christ returns. Paul knows this. And so where does this leave us? And not even just in the text, as we finish up today, we finish up this first letter from Paul. Where does it leave us in the church? The counsel of the holy and righteous and living God has been given to us. Counsel that is often viewed as offensive. Counsel that is often viewed against the best wisdom of the day. How are we as a church to share this message of redemption that so many people see as outdated, as irrelevant? Well, I'd like to leave us with this little saying as a church: prioritize being gracious and not grumpy. That may not be a profound theological statement. It might not sound something a scholar would say, but it's important as we remember the contents of this letter to be gracious and not grumpy. Whenever I think of grumpy, I think of Snow White, the Seven Dwarfs. Disney just released a live-action Snow White movie. If you haven't seen it yet, don't worry. Nobody else has apparently either. But the grumpy is one of the dwarves that you remember. And you're just like, why? It's like, because he was just grumpy. He was just, this is who he was. It was just, why? It just drew your attention in a negative way towards him and what he was about and everything that he did. And so if the outside world is going to look at the church, it's going to look at us as believers, we don't want to be grumpy. We want to be gracious. We want to be hopeful. We want to share that message of hope with everyone else. The Apostle Peter puts it this way: but in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect. We are not told to always be able to give an eloquent answer to theological questions, even though this is important. We're not told to be able to back up our claims with notebooks full of scientific evidence, although there are notebooks full of this type of evidence for us to use. What we are told is always be able to give a reason for the hope that is in you. We are people of grace. We are people of redemption. We are people who have an eternal focus. And because of that, we should be people of hope as well and share that hope with others. As I was going through school, I always had a lot of teachers and I always had a lot of coaches, and they were interesting people, but every single one of them, as I think back, every single one of them had several what I would think of as good or righteous qualities, or things that I appreciated about them. And when I was in college, our baseball coach in college, he's still there. He's still coaching Elon's baseball team. He hated losing. He thought we should win every single game, which made him a good coach, but he hated losing, and he did not always take losing very well, and sometimes he took it out on us when we lost. And this was true from my freshman year to my senior year, probably still happening today, I would imagine. But one of the things that I remember is at the end of every year, the last game, because unless you win a national championship, your last game is always a loss. Yes? Any Duke fans in the house today? Yeah. Unless you win a national championship, your last game of the season is always a loss. True? Yes. But so this guy who hated losing, who handled it very poorly, who took it out on us occasionally, that last game, he was the most positive person on that bus. It's like, I remember my freshman year, I was like, who is this guy? But especially to the seniors, especially to those who realize you're never going to play again. This is it for you, for all of us. He was especially, I would even say compassionate with them, because he realized that he loved the game, he loved winning, he hated losing, but he realized this is just a game. We were at, if you're senior, most of you were 22, 23-year-old kids, and you have a great and a hopeful future ahead of you. The world is not ending because you have lost your last baseball game ever. And for us as a church, that's the type of people we need to be. Whether our finances are up or down, whether things are going great or poor, whether our health is declining or getting better, no matter what, we are always people of hope. Because we realize that those things, those profane, temporal things, they're not the end of the world. And that we've been promised life and redemption and a sufficient worth, not because of who we are, but because of what God has done for us. And so we prioritize grace and we prioritize hope. And we are not grumpy people to the outside world. And so this morning we get to reflect and focus our attention on the source of our hope. We get to share in the Lord's Supper together. I'm going to ask the deacons if they will come forward and just wait a moment here at the front. Here at First Baptist Church, the table is open to anyone who professes Jesus Christ as Savior and Lord. You do not have to be a member of this church. If you're visiting with us, please feel free to take part in communion if you are a follower of Christ. And as the elements are being passed around, this is what I would ask you to do. I want to ask you to think on, to reflect on, to realize our own limitations, to realize the way in which we are imperfect, and we are sinful, and we are unworthy of the grace of God, and yet He chooses to provide for us a source of righteousness and redemption. And so as the deacons are passing these elements out, I ask that you would reflect on that, and then we will take them together here in